Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daryl Urbanski, your host as always. And today we are joined by Daniel Lipp, a seasoned techie and a champion of Agile servant leadership. With a rich 25 plus year journey in software development, Daniel has evolved from crafting code to leading teams and shaping Agile transformations in the finance and software industries. His passion for continuous improvement and team development shines through his work. Daniel's expertise spans Agile methodologies, IT architecture, software development, and mentoring.
Currently serving as CTO of Crop Protection R&D at Syngenta Group, he blends technical prowess with a deep commitment to empowering his teams.
I've asked Daniel to join us here today to share his story, plus his insights on digitization, servant leadership, Agile transformation, and enterprise architecture, plus how these drive success in the tech world. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for the invitation. It's a big pleasure to be on your podcast and can't wait to start talking to you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. Obviously, you've got a very rich and diverse background. And before we get too much into the weeds, I always like to start off by asking, how did you even get into this? Obviously, leading teams, it's, what am I trying to say? Leading teams, leading people in this field of work. It's not something that everyone is drawn to doing or everyone is good at. How did you get into this? Were your parents involved in the tech world? Were your parents team leads? Were your parents project managers, team leads? Is this something you picked up from them or?
Yeah, actually not at all. Not at all. My mom was like office worker and later like a housewife for years. I have 4 siblings, right? My dad was a craftsman actually and later worked in industry. But when I was a teenager, I had a teacher at school, a math teacher, who was really visionary, and he showed up with one of the first computers and did fancy stuff with it, steering electronic cars and things. So that was really exciting. And then I had the feeling this is something for me, and I started to write programs. Actually, I didn't own a computer, so I went to a local store where they exposed one and started to explore programming, and it felt good. So I invested more time, and then later, that's why I chose the career in that area. And I had no idea that I would end up in managing. Actually, I really enjoyed becoming an expert, or that's what I tried. So like optimizing the code, how could you do better? At the beginning, it's like about expanding the functions about the language, right? All the possibilities. Later, then it's design stuff. And like in probably 10, 12 years in my career, I realized that there's kind of some bosses I like to work for, and there's some that I don't like to work for. And I started to observe a little bit what's going on, and I realized that quite many of them made, I'd say, simple mistakes from my perception. And I had the feeling that it would be a big lever if you would do those things right, and you're responsible, I don't know, for 20 guys, right? That would multiply up. So I realized, oh, this is something I want to do. And I was close to, was getting a chance as a deputy in a company, and that felt really good. But I wasn't having the final say. So then I changed job and went precise in a position where I had the final say, just to see whether I can do it. And that was a really small thing initially. And then I was lucky in the sense of that the demand was really growing fastly. So we had to hire a lot and do interviews and stuff. And this is a chance to, I don't know, pick the right mindset for people that then might enable you to perform or to create high performing teams. So that's how that journey went. That was not like a master plan or something like that. It was intuition, maybe, let's say it.
Very organic. Sounds like very organic.
Yeah, organic is a good word. Yeah.
So what were some of the biggest challenges in your career? There's a lot there. First, you have to learn how to program, to learn how to develop final tools. Then you have to learn how to build and hire and train and manage a team. You talked about high performing teams. What were some of the biggest challenges that you feel you faced in your business career, and how did you overcome them?
Okay, so I think there's two kinds of those challenges. The one is people that are, let's say, happy with the state where they are, which is absolutely fine. But if you're working in an environment and try to become better, and some people have the feeling, I know it all, I have done it for 5 years or 10 years, it's really hard to move to motivate them. And at some point, what I learned is sometimes it's best for both sides if we split, right? If they go to another place Like to compare it with the sports. If you're a trainer of a team and you taking over and it's in a certain league and your ambition is to get higher in leagues, right? You start to change things in training. Probably you hire better players, and some of the existing ones, they will be motivated and start to train harder and grow as well and increase their skills. And others might want to lean back and say, oh, listen, I don't need that, end of my career, whatever. I rather stay in my comfort zone, basically. This is the one challenge, and that's the one thing that I'm looking most for in hiring interviews. It's actually two things, right? The soft skills, like I call it the beer factor. Would I like to go out with that person to have a beer? Right? The social aspect, and the other thing is the thrive for improving, for getting better in something. Because I have the feeling this is something, it's hard to develop, but tons of people have it actually. Just have to make sure that you spot it right.
The growth mindset. I think that's really important, because either you have a set of skills and eventually they will be obsolete, or you have something that you're constantly improving. I don't mean to bring him into this, but Elon Musk is either we become a multi-planet species or we're just hanging out on Earth waiting for the next meteoroid to come along. There's really just two options. Either we are growing or we're just waiting to be made extinct. That's really it. There's no middle ground. And I think it applies, like you mentioned, to people, teams, industries. I think that's a really powerful thing. So there's a couple of things that I want to dive into. I think a lot of the world's been forced, obviously, into digital transformation, right? Since COVID. And even companies, small businesses, as simple as a dry cleaner, all of a sudden go, hey, we need an app, or hey, we need to have an online presence. What would you recommend to someone starting out and struggling with kind of, I guess you would say, like software product development, like having to, maybe they're a brick and mortar business of sorts, or they're just not techie. Like maybe they use Facebook and whatever, Twitter or X, but now they've got to, like, now I actually have to build software components of my company too. What would you recommend to someone starting out or struggling?
I would highly recommend to reach out to an IT guy in their network, basically, because if I wanted to construct a hut in my garden and I have no clue, I'll probably ask a friend who is in that construction space, because he might have 10, 15 years experience, or she, right? And same here. And so IT is a distinct discipline, right? And if you're really not into it, just from a user perspective, did something, it's overwhelming, right? I don't know how you would be able to find the best path or find question to your answers efficiently, if not reaching out to a guy that you trust. And you can him, and then if it makes sense, you might maybe follow those steps. If it doesn't make sense for you, you can always ask for a second opinion. But it has a reason why it's our own discipline, right? Because it's very complex and evolving so fast, right? I mean,
so I know, for example, like in engineering in general, there's a process it goes something like, step 1 is brainstorm, step 2 is research, step 3 is prototype, and then step 4 is final build. So the idea is you brainstorm what your end result is supposed to look like. You research ways to make that happen. You put a couple prototypes together, really super basic concept ideas, and you stick in this research prototype for a few iterations until you feel like you've got something that has traction, that maybe has some teeth to it. And then you start working on a final build. Would that sort of thing work in tech development? If a company's, I need an app, or I need to whatever, we need to digitize ourselves.
Absolutely. Let's say in not so long ago, let's say 20 years ago, and some companies still are doing it. Development was like drafting all the features you want basically upfront, right? I don't know, 20 pages Word document, giving it to a team. They would implement it, they come back, most likely with delay, right? If they keep the deadline, most likely the quality is not where you wanted it. And then the surprise is, oh, but that's not what I wanted. And no surprise, if the customer never had touched the system, it's hard to tell how it would feel. So it's like you going to a garage and say, build me a custom car, and it needs to be fast. And how are the odds that it's going to meet your expectations? No, I didn't want to have the engine in the back. I wanted it in the front. It didn't specify. So there's so many variants that there's simply no way to specify it. And also the expectation might change over time. So that's
Right.
why people went to start with the small iterations and constant contact, basically, right? Constantly showcasing what the current state is, that what you
Yep.
wanted, next iteration, and to specify more precisely. And some people always think, oh, that's a waste of time to specify what you expect. But so now, if you're about to spend, I don't know, a team, 7, 8 guys for 2 weeks, it's quite an investment, right? So you want to
Right.
make sure that the outcome is what you expect. So it's worth spending half an hour to specify this is how that feature should work, so to make sure that it's implemented that way. It's not that teams don't want to implement what the customer expects. It's just they're speaking different languages. So you need
Yes.
this kind of specification as a kind of a contract, right? And a confirmation. And then, yeah, with the constant iterations, in most of the cases, it's that you're building something completely new, right?
Right.
That team never did before, the customer never had something like that. So how would you expect that they precisely meet what the guys wanted, right? So stay in close contact and try something out. And for the prototyping, sometimes it's technically challenges. I don't know, we never connected a certain system with another system. So what you typically do is, in early days, you started like with a database layer, business layer, and then you put the UI, the user interface on top, and
Right.
only then you could see something, right? And nowadays you start to do it vertically, basically. You pick one of the top challenging functions, let's say, and build it from a database access to the UI, so that, well, people get a feel on how that would work. And you probably already had to integrate certain systems and overcome like the most challenging, the biggest challenges, and you have a better guess on, okay, what would be the effort for the whole system. So that's why, yeah, this prototyping is crucial. Absolutely. It's changed the
Yeah.
world.
You know, something that
Incredible.
was really an aha for me, I was really shocked by this, is I forget who I was talking to, but someone was saying that a lot of people think that your software tools have to have lots of features. It's got to be a Swiss Army knife of things. And if I mentioned two companies, which one would you think would be bigger? HubSpot versus Dropbox. A lot of people go, well, HubSpot, because it's like a CRM tool and it's a landing page builder, and they've got one you can do cold calls from, or not cold, but you can do sales team calls from it, and it holds recordings and it integrates with 1,000 different tools. Dropbox is something like 5 times bigger in terms of revenue, and it is a one feature product.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just you upload your file, you send
yeah,
it to someone, and they
yeah,
download it. And there's a
yeah.
ton of these one feature products that are just crushing it because they solve a single problem really well versus trying to solve 100 things once.
Yeah.
So I love what you said, where before you would have the database layer, the business layer, the UI, the user experience, or the user interface. And you try to get as much packed into as you could, where now, if I understood you correctly, it's like you start with one function, one feature, one thing it does, and then you work from the database to the user interface. And then from that, it's almost that's your foundation, like a house. That's your foundation. Now you add features and that, and you go, now that we've accomplished this, which is almost like in project management, a Gantt chart, your critical path. Now that we've achieved this minimum viable product that does this one thing, this one trick pony, what do we want to add to it? And what do we feel is possible because of whatever we've learned or haven't learned?
Absolutely. And now the cool thing, and that more cool things here. Ideal, let's say in some cases, with this one feature, you could already go to market, basically. So you would
Right.
already start earning revenue after, I don't know, 3 months instead of after 2 years. And now, as people are using it, you get feedback on the existing things. So you get much better hints what is the next requested features, right? I mean, you can track, let's say at some point you have 5 features. And typically you track from a system side, right? What features are used how often? If you analyze that, you will find, okay, there's this one feature. I don't know, probably you invested the same amount of time for all 5 features. The one feature is used once a month, and there's another feature that's used 1,000 times on a daily basis. So which feature makes more sense to improve in the near future? Of course, that one,
Right.
right? You can reach out to your customers, ask, okay, what would be the next thing you wanted to have, and these kind of things. So you make sure that you dedicate your time and effort in a direction that serves a purpose, and not that you imagined that would make sense, right? Listen to the customers.
And how does agile transformation fit into this?
The Agile basically brought this approach of iterations, right? You're developing in sprints, basically. And so you basically planning only for those 2 weeks, right? The customer or customer representative basically gives the priorities. Now, this is the things we want to have next. And the team, very self-organized, right, decides who takes up what task, what they start with, whatever. And they have basically complete freedom. Nobody's telling them how they should do it. They are told like what they should do, right? And if they commit, if they say, okay, yeah, this is doable in 2 weeks, they start to organize themselves. And the next basically key point, the next milestone is when the sprint is done, then they're gonna present it to the customers, right? So you get a confirmation that you're on the right track. Ideally, that you build in quality and whatever. You build trust because the customer is seeing something is developing and not waiting 2 years and then you see it for the first time, right? This is always a big uncertainty. That's the one advantage. And the other advantage is that Agile teams, after those 2 weeks, they do a retrospective, right? They discuss, okay, what went well and what can we improve? This is coming back to that gene of optimization, right? If you put together a team of people, they might be super technical experts, but they never work together. It takes it some time. It's called a storming phase, right? Till they know each other well enough and trust and know who has what capabilities. Again, same as in sports, right? If you play the best soccer players of the world, put them together on the field, will probably not work out until they had time to get to know each other and figure out a technique that works well for this set of people. So it's I would say I only see advantage. It's tremendous if you continue doing those things, the iterations, the retrospectives, and all these kind of things, right? The productivity of a team. It's not that we're talking like 10, 20% better than for our average team. It's factors. It's, I'd say, factor 5 to 10. It's crazy what you can make happen then.
Does that mean that they have to work extra late and burn the midnight oil and live off?
No, absolutely not. That's a very good question, because this is the one in the whole HR world, there's one word that I don't like, and that's the word sprint. Because sprint implies you're going as fast as you can. And I'm actually a marathon runner. So if you start a marathon, it's not the guy who would
The person
do
who
best,
goes fastest at the beginning wins, right? That's how marathons work. You got to go real fast at the beginning. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's how you win.
Exactly. So the first 100 meters, that counts. And that's the other cool thing. Let's say nowadays for people, they have busy lives and work-life balance and everything is way more important. If you enable them, and the team will realize themselves, okay, this is now one sprint where we have to go work probably long hours, whatever, typically not a problem. But to make it sustainable, right? If you have tried to enforce your team to spend every weekend stuff, it's not sustainable, right? Velocity, it's called the velocity, the capability to deliver features, right? That will decrease over time. And nowadays it's very easy to measure. So basically give them the freedom, give them the liberty to choose the working hours. For example, the one guy is really good in the morning and a girl is, I don't know, better in the evening. Give them the freedom as long as there's some overlap, as long as they can coordinate. Let them try to figure out the best ways of working, right? And this is, in the long term, this is the much better result. Doesn't make sense to push them to deadlines all the time. Won't help.
Yeah, I love that, because I think it was Naval, the guy that I really like. He's a billionaire. He's had 70 successful exits. 10 of the companies were unicorns. They were over $1 billion in valuation. He's an early stage investor in Twitter, Uber, Foursquare, all these companies. And he talks about, it's not 10,000 hours, it's 10,000 iterations that we learn through iterations. And what I love about this is often people have quarterly goals. That's not new. OKRs, KPIs, quarterly goals, that's not new. And people, they start the quarter strong and they go, nah, in the middle, everything turns to mashed potatoes. And then they panic at the end of the quarter. They got to meet, whereas here you take your quarterly goal or your project, you break it into 2-week pieces. You give yourself a little wiggle room, knowing that issues will arise. And all of a sudden, it's proper planning, clear accountability really does drastically change the environment of things. I'm really sick of some of the clients that I've worked with recently. I'm really sick of this kind of old school culture where you insult people and you blame them, or I don't know, you don't have any solutions or answer. I just want results. Like, I understand the results, but when you hire people, you hire them to do a task, and it's really hard for anyone to guarantee an outcome. And whatever it is, you can't say, we're going to ship a finished product in 2 weeks. You can't really say that. You can go, hey, you know what? We're going to do 3 rounds of 2-week sprints, and we're going to iterate to try to have a 1 feature minimum viable product. You know what I mean? I think, and correct me if my timelines are wrong or that, but as opposed, you get what I'm saying? It's almost like I feel like in a lot of ways, people are so detached from being in the weeds of things. They want to outsource, they want to delegate, they want to do all this. And then they just want to cry like big babies and not understand that there's a process to it all. And what I love that we're talking about here is it's making things manageable, breaking it into realistic pieces and having
Yeah.
clear accountability. It's not, let's forget about it and talk about it in 3 months. It's, hey,
Yeah.
let's talk about it maybe every day the first week, every
Yeah.
couple days the second week. And at the end, let's carve out time to look at how we're doing, review it, and then make some decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple of thoughts there. So the one thing I really love that not the 10,000 hours, but iteration. I never heard that, but it completely makes sense. And
Yeah.
I think it was Einstein saying that you would be a fool to do the same things and expect different results, right? It's
Right.
You have to adapt. And as you said, like in those iterations, there's yet another thing on top of that. That's basically how you're tracking today, right? You're having tickets in an issue tracking system. So basically the tasks some people are working on, everybody has assigned a task, or there's a list of tasks and someone says, okay, I'll take over that task. He moves it in progress. So you have a kind of visualization, what's going on, right? And this is also this transparency, full transparency. This creates trust. There's nothing to hide, right?
Right.
And the team is daily, there's this daily stand-up routine, right? 50 minutes in the morning where everybody from the team will gather, everybody will quickly go around the task he's working on, basically saying what he did since yesterday, what he's supposed or what he is expecting to do for today, and if there's anything he's blocked where someone can help, right? And like that, you basically everybody knows what's going on, and if I don't know if someone becomes sick, right, not showing up for 2 weeks, it's very easy to take over what he was doing because people are in the picture. If in a traditional approach, let's say everybody is on his own business, someone is sick or you have a big problem or someone is on holidays for 4 weeks, his system is not working, you had to call him, right? I
Right.
don't want that. I don't want the others to jump in if someone is not available. Also with this close collaboration, you're learning from each other. It's how do you best develop your skills? Work with excellent people in a certain area. So there's so many things, and actually I'm convinced that I was really lucky that ended up in software development, because this is where all these ways of working started, right? That this is where it started, but it's very applicable to other domains as well. Daily stand up, trying to develop, let's say, multiple skills. And in early days, you had specialists. You have someone is able to design front end, someone is able to do database stuff, someone is able to do business layer, right? Now, if in a certain iteration there would be no work for the database guy, so what do you do with him? Yeah.
Right.
But
Right.
if you have people developing multiple skills, they can jump in, they can complete each other, they can help out. And it's again, it feels good to learn new things, right? So they will
Right.
grow their knowledge, their skills. This is there's so many aspects to it. Yeah.
So talking about developing new skills and people becoming multifaceted, I'm curious to hear your insights on no code tools and AI coding assistance. What is the state of the union, so to speak, for those? Do you think they're realistic for creating viable products? What timeline do you think these things are going to become more widespread? Is this something a business owner today should be paying attention to?
Absolutely. There's a revolution going on, right? So the no code or low code system, that's basically, let's say, pre-configured pieces where you, let's say, describe what you want on yet a higher level, so it's more efficient. Let me quickly come back. In early days, also when I started programming, there was assembler still around, right? To program a calculator that could add numbers, right? In assembler, probably it would be, 200 lines. In a high-level language like Java or .NET, it's like a couple of lines, right? And now with the no-code or low-code thing, it's probably you have pieces that you can just put together visually, ideally, right? And that will work for a certain type of applications. Probably not very sophisticated one, but for like the typical things, or to have a workflow for an authority or in an administration department of any company. I'm pretty sure that already today there is tools that are ways more efficient than traditional programming, right? And I know areas in my company actually where they did a lot of stuff with no code, low code applications, right? So I don't know, let's say maybe 1/10 or even 1/50 code less, and still they get 90% of the features they would expect. So that's very
Huge. Yeah, that's big. That's really
that's
big.
amazing. Yeah.
Now, I have a
And
question about this in terms of IP. And if you code something from the ground up, you own that code
yeah,
on your server, your staging platforms. But if you build something using these tools, you're essentially, it's almost like a condo. You're signing up to pay them money for life. You've built a house on
yeah,
their land.
yeah,
What are some of the risks and benefits involved in that?
yeah. This is called the vendor login, right? In traditional programming, all those tools are basically free, right? If I want to develop in Java, that's free to use, right? They have free runtime and stuff. There's maybe you're paying something for the development environment, so that's the application where the coders are working, but it's no strong dependency. If I'm not happy with that one, I can change to another development environment. Very fine, my code will still work, right? That's the advantage there. This no-code, low-code application, at least all of them that I'm aware of at the moment, they're
Same.
not open source, right? They are commercial. So yeah, you have this vendor login. And as this is rather new, let's say, there's always the risk that you go for a solution that will not survive, right? Because competition will be stronger, they do bad decisions, bad investment, whatever. And then you're stuck. The worst thing that could happen if it's a small company, if it disappears in 2 years, you have to rewrite your systems. So there
Right.
is a dependency. That's something to consider. And the other thing is, and that comes back to what you said earlier, the other crazy development is, again, the race of AI, generative AI, large language model, those approaches, right? Because they also have an impact on software development. There's quite some people saying we're going to need much less developers in the future for the same amount of problems. And I'm completely convinced there will be new areas where you need developers. But
Right.
with the support of AI, this is already today boosting productivity
Oh,
by
yeah.
factors. Yeah, by factors.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I liken it to accounting and bookkeeping and calculators and spreadsheets, where those were major breakthroughs for those industries. When originally your bookkeeper and accountant would have to do the math themselves, and then calculators came up, and the productive ones became more productive, and the ones that hated their job lost their excuse for why it took them 3 days to do 2 + 2 = 4. And I think it's the same thing with spreadsheets and formulas. It allowed people, it was a better tool that allowed people to be more productive, which increased the speed of competition, perhaps the speed of turnaround. But not everybody made the change, so to speak, and made it through the filter, so to speak, because some people didn't want to grow and adapt, and some people weren't interested in being more productive. That's
Yeah, and it's I understand that some concerns, yeah, but you won't be able to stop the usage of those technologies. So
right.
if you are a company, if you're not adapting, you will become less productive than the competition, and the chances are that you go out of the market soon. So let's take it as a chance. And actually, one of the first things that I realized when going into programming, it was like, hey, cool, I can make the machine do the tedious stuff that I don't want to do, the repetitive stuff, as
Yes.
you mentioned, right? And this is now getting to a next level. Now with AI, you can even, I don't know, get your PowerPoint presentation if you need one created, or more or less there's already systems where can basically a non-programmer can have a whole website, right? That's not a big deal nowadays. So I like that. That's cool because I don't think that it will replace humans. It will replace the humans that have been working in that ways that the tools now
Right.
can do. So think about it, and there is always room for new things to do.
I have a couple of questions. One is about, so you're developing software tools, but you need people to use them. Obviously, you try your best to anticipate any challenges and that your users experience, but ultimately, I've never seen anybody build something, launch it, and it be flawless the day it goes out the door. It's very rare without a lot of prototyping in advance. Can you speak to that? Like, how do people find beta users? How do they've got something, they want to test it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a challenge in and of itself, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's a great point because I think that's one of the most underestimated or underrated disciplines in development. I guess if you would go out to the street and ask people, more than 90% will not be aware that there is a kind of a discipline how to optimize those things. And actually there was a lot of initiatives already in the 90s. And actually Microsoft was starting that. That was like basically having test labs and have their prototypes and set people in front of computer, say, okay, let's use the system. And with minimal instruction, basically. And they were observing they could measure the movements with the mouse, they had the eye tracking later and the stuff like that. And you realized, okay, what is the, let's say, the tendency of people, where they are looking, and but where did I put my button, and all those kind of things. And with this really observation and measuring, they could improve the user experience of the systems. And this is something which is not probably to the unexperienced, it's not obvious, but it will make a difference. If you have two tools and the one has a real good user experience and the other not, you will feel better using the tool with the better user experience. But it's crazy that, because there's still today, there's so many products out there that have really a real bad user experience, and still they sell. And it's typically, or oftentimes, the users are blaming themselves. So I don't really like the tool. I don't really know how to use that. Yeah, because they did not really invest in user experience, right? And there was actually one breakthrough that you will very well remember, and that's not on the desktops, but on the mobiles. First smartphone, right? The older mobiles, you had to look up how to use certain functions, how to, I don't know, change the language, whatever. Tons of menus, no way how to navigate through them, right? And then the smartphone shows up, iPhone basically, and everything is self-explanatory, right?
Yeah, it's touch intuitive.
Yeah, and this is not a coincidence. It's a lot of investment. It's a lot of investment. But let's say, as you said earlier, like for a startup and stuff like that, I will really highly recommend invest a lot there, because if you typically you will go into a market where there's other players as well, and the user experience can be the differentiator. People would go for the tool that feels best, that is self-explanatory.
I love that. I think that's important, because at the end of the day, people are paying for this to solve a problem, and it's like, maybe you pay for a tour, or you want to go on a safari, and one person picks you up in a nice clean Jeep, and you fit in the seat, and it's comfortable, and you go on this nice safari where there's air conditioning if you want it, or you want the windows down, and you're good. Whereas somebody else is trying to charge the same amount of money, or almost the same, and the springs are poking out of the seats, and you can't see out of the window, but you still went on a safari type thing. There's no air con, you're sweating in the sun, the roof is off.
Yeah. And like the gear shifter is not where you expected. It's not between the front seats, but I don't know, on the ceiling, and this doesn't make you feel comfortable. You're used to use, I don't know, hundreds of software applications already. So if there's a new one added, it has to feel the same. There's like concepts, I don't know, right click should open a context menu, all these kind of things. There's kind of standards, but they're not visible to everybody. But it's very important to apply.
Yeah, I think this is really important. I don't know if people recognize it. There's room for in almost every business for this, even industries that or areas that you don't think perhaps would lend to it. And it's just going to make things better. First off, the scalability of software is something that should have everybody's attention. Gmail serves 1 billion people with a B, and there's 40 engineers that work on that. The scale, the ROI of time, energy, and effort alone for 40 people, the leverage is massive. So that alone should have everyone's attention. And the unique ways it can be applied. Perfect example, I'm building a house, and the subdivision that we're in, we have to meet certain requirements to make the people happy to build in there. And it was typically a 1 month turnaround time to get your construction plans approved. But now they've just launched, as of yesterday, I believe, the digital, like an upload process to try to expedite things. And their goal, they stated, is a 4-day turnaround time. Because now, instead of having to sift through emails and forms, all that, they have the thing that they need to know in all the boxes, and they're probably having AI verify or match things as it goes. And that's huge for some people. When you're trying to organize laborers and materials and weather and all sorts of, and if you're living somewhere else. So it's just a simple example of how just a little bit of digitization can really give you an advantage.
Absolutely. And the sad thing, if you're an insider, is that, like, for authorities, especially, right, there was already a huge potential before the rise of AI. There's technologies around since 20 years that you could use, and they're still not using it. I give you one example where I was really frustrated when in the pandemic, right, when the vaccination came, and like in Germany, you could apply basically for a time slot to get a vaccination. And there was some kind of prioritization, of course, like the elderly first, and that's all fine. But the system, the government built, was basically a website where you could check, okay, I'm living there, I want to have a vaccination, I'm that age, and I want to go on that day. And then it said, no slot available. And there was no way that you could not even let enter your mobile number saying, send me an SMS when it's on my turn, right? Something like that. So they could register. No way. So you had to come back. In 2021, was it, right? Or two. How crazy is that? And then people started to invest hours in crawling those websites, clicking, and then they found a spot, I don't know, 600 kilometers apart, and they took their car and drove over because they wanted the vaccination, others didn't want yet. That would have been a 1 week or 2 week job for any apprentice in development, right? To write a system, enter your age, enter your mobile number, what are the priorities, and then what is the place nearest to the guy, and a close spot around his availability, in send an SMS and gone. Super easy. But the people involved there, obviously, it looks like they didn't know about those capabilities, and a whole nation, I don't know, lost millions of hours and efficiency. So that's
that's like Canada built an Arrive Can app. It was an app for people arriving to Canada to process them with less contact. And I might have the number wrong, but it was something like $2 to $12 million to build this app, full of bugs. And a year later, I think there was a couple of programmers out of Toronto that submitted proposals and specs saying, I could have done this for $12,000. I could have done this for $12,000, not millions, and I think some of this is people are just afraid to dive into the details because it can be confusing in a lot. If you don't speak a language, if you're not techie, it can seem really overwhelming. But they do say, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book, I think it was Blink, talking about expertise, and that it may take 10,000 hours to become a world expert in something. But what a lot of people don't realize is it only takes about 20 to grab the fundamentals of something, just to get out of that awkward newbie phase. If you can put 20 hours in to focused learning. I talk about this. If you're at the gym, it's not on your phone. It's doing the exercise. It's 20 hours of time under tension doing the thing. If you can do that, you get through that awkward teenager stage of whatever you're doing. And now you're intermediate and you get what's going on. You may not be great, but you know that you suck. And you at least are aware of what's going on. And you can be in the conversation. And I just think that we talk about the pandemic. I think if anything, it just really helped me, at least, understand people are not as smart as we thought they were. We have idiots in all levels and positions of power. And you just got to be careful, I think. You get what you inspect. And we all need to inspect things more, which goes back to why a 2-week sprint is a great idea, because you're regularly inspecting what people are working on, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing is reach out to the experts, right? I would not expect any politician to be an expert in software development. So if they have the idea they have a demand, okay, let's reach out to the reach guys. And actually, in some cases, it might be wise to spend a couple of millions instead of thousands for an application, because the factor of scaling is huge, right? If this is a time saving for 2 million people, it might still be good investment. But so many times the people not having the right advices, right? I don't know, it's maybe bribes even involved. I don't care. Or like old-fashioned companies that are involved that have this traditional approach. And actually, it's not only in the process of the programming where you can make a lot of different errors. It's also like in the analysis phase, as we said before, right? If you don't have people that are able to cut the whole vision into pieces and specify it precisely so that it can be implemented, then you will also end up with the crazy things. And I'd say it's sometimes surprising. Let's say if you have the 10, let's say the 10 features that the customer is expecting, and there's 11th one he's not thinking about, and you give that to an implementation team, it might, and later on they realize, by the way, this is also something we wanted. That could have had a huge impact for the architecture of the system. So knowing these key things up front, it really makes sense to challenge them. Is this everything you would think? Don't you think this could happen as well and stuff? And sometimes it's not sure, but it's discussing likelihood for certain things help to create better decisions on how to set up your systems. You're building a house, if upfront that you will have 10 cars and you need like a 2-floor garage under it, it would be wise to know that upfront and consider it when you start the construction, right? Because it's
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
be really hard to do it later or more expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually use that with clients. We call it the rule of 10,000. If you're going to bake 5 blueberry pies, the infrastructure, the process you need is very different than if you're going to bake 10,000 blueberry pies. So it's really important in business to begin with the end in mind and to constantly think, what if we were to do this 10,000 times? What if I had to communicate with 10,000 people about our free whatever? What if we had to onboard 10,000 people? What if we had to handle 10,000 orders? What if we had to handle 10,000 refunds? What if we had to handle 10,000 upgrades? What if we had, and this comes in when you talk about the product testing and the beta testing and the user experience being super important, because in any group of 1,000+ people, you're going to have a lot of different variants in likes, dislikes, strengths, weaknesses. And so it's really important that you do what you can to. It's not that people are dumb. It's not that any of that. Often it's they're either busy, preoccupied, they're unfamiliar with the tools, and the onus is on us to really deliver them. Society pays for what it can't do for itself. So when I go to the dentist, I wouldn't need to pay the dentist if I knew what I was doing. If I go to the mechanic, I wouldn't need to, right? And this is where people get so peeved if they are mistreated or feel ripped off, because that's why I came to the business.
Yeah. And there's one huge advantage again in developing applications and stuff. It's the factor of scale. If I'm constructing cars, and of course, if I'm selling more cars, I have more revenue, but I also have higher construction costs. I have to pay the material and everything. The software is there. It's more or less the same costs if I have millions of users or just tens, right? So, and that's the chance. And that's why in the race, when, let's say 20 years ago, when you had a brilliant idea, if you had a setup that would scale, your expectation is to grow your business. So if it's good enough software, if it's out in the internet, Amazon started small, eBay started small, right? If you had the right precautions taken, you had much better chances to grow fast than others that have had the kind of the restricted mindset. Yeah, the growth mindset again, makes a difference.
I love this. What are some other future trends that you're watching? We talked about low code, no code, learning language models. Are there other trends on the horizon? Where do you think things are going to be in 5-10 years from now?
Yeah, not really a new one. We started to talk about the influence of AI also on those systems. So what I see, what is super exciting is also a couple of things. There's this nice saying, data is the new gold, right? Today you can measure everything. And like in the case of my company, right, we're agriculture, ag tech company. You can collect data about humidity in a field, temperature, whatever, this kind of thing. You can collect data in a lab from a microscope, from any instrument, basically. They have these capabilities, but till now, in many cases, they were not brought together to let's say, one pool, where then like algorithms could be run and find patterns that no human could find, because it's just the amount of data is just too big, right? Today we have the algorithms, we have the capacities, calculation power basically, and we have the means to gather all those data. So doing this, we expect tremendous results, like from having an idea for a certain product that you want to bring to market to really deploy it, like cutting the time to half, or basically, right, with this approach. And there's been so many cases where, say, things were doable that were beyond imagination, because you always have the limited thing. Get another example, but I recently saw, like with doctors' cancers, scanning pictures and deciding that this is cancer or not.
Right.
There's algorithms that are better than any doctor out there.
Yep.
And
they never get tired.
They were trained with so many pictures, right? And they could detect patterns that the human eye cannot detect.
Yep.
Yeah. But say this, how great is that, right? We have the chance now to improve our health. Yeah. So tons of those things. Yeah. So really combination of data and AI and the wise usage of it. That's going to be the biggest thing, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic. I think that's great. Sorry, not topic, but a great point. So what are some of the habits that you think are mission critical? We talked about a lot of things and pieces, but to really hit the nail on the head, what are some of the habits that you feel are most important to be successful in running a team to develop and ship products consistently and improve over time?
I think really, like, being a good observer, being a good listener, like authentically listen to what's going on, and you never be certain that even if things are working well, that this will still be the case or the optimal case in the future. Things are changing. It's evolution is there, and survival is optional. So if you don't adapt, you might end up in a dead end. So really, always, and also challenging yourself, right? And encourage people to challenge yourself in constant discussion. Are we doing the right things? Having a vision of what's coming on, scanning the landscape for new inventions,
Yep.
and thinking about, okay, how could I use that to be more efficient in what I am doing, right? If you're ignoring trends, that might be really dangerous. And nowadays it's hard because there's so many things going on. But yeah, let's take it as a chance. You don't have, at the end of the day, you will not be as successful only if you scan all of them. But if you, it's better to scan some of them than none, and really try to look ahead, which is, I think, really tough in nowadays, because with
Right.
that crazy speed of innovation, I think it's really hard to predict what's being around in 5 weeks. But the combination, using the right tools, having the right architecture, that's something we did not talk about yet. Maybe we can spend a couple of minutes there as well. And then the right people, and especially the people that are interacting well together, right? If I have the biggest minds, but they're not interacting together, the result will not be the same as if I have a collaboration going on. Right?
So yeah, let's dive into that. What do you mean by the right architecture?
Okay, I always like to take the analogy with the construction, right? So house building and stuff. Just one example: you're building a house. Okay, you're building a foundation. It's different. If the house will be like 10 flights, you probably need a more solid foundation than if it's only 2 flights.
Right.
This kind of things, right? So this is in software development, it's basically called non-functional requirements. The customer says, I want a system that does that. But now, are you expecting 500 users a day, or 5,000, or 5 million? That will have a change.
Right.
Difference in the best architecture, right? There's a nice saying, like the best architecture for a system is the simplest one that fulfills all the needs. Yeah, but this is not something really easy to discuss. And just one change, for example, in a couple of years ago, even today somehow, there were monolithic systems, right? Systems that had everything built in one thing, right? One block of software, basically. And now you realize, okay, for another application, there would be that one piece that I could reuse. Yeah, but if that was not foreseen, you could not reuse it. And then with time pressure, then again, like sprints and stuff, maybe, right? They start to copy it, maybe, or to duplicate it. Now, over time, you might end up with 10, 20, or no, depending on the size of your landscape, similar pieces of code, 500 lines doing more or less the same thing. Now realize there's a bug on those things, right? You have to fix all of them. It's crazy. So if you have a better design, extract those as a service so everybody can call it, right? You just have to maintain it once, and you're more flexible. If a new application shows up and you have a couple of those services, hey, it's very easy to adapt it, right? The other thing is, if you have a more homogeneous approach for many applications, it's easier to do changes if you have to do changes. Recently, everybody went to the cloud, or many of them are still on the journey, right? If you had all these monoliths, basically no way. If you already had a more service-oriented approach and running stuff on VMs, it was a smaller hurdle, right? If you had 20 different technologies for the same thing, it's way more work, because you have to to turn a head around how to get this type of applications in the cloud and this kind of things. So this investment, it's behind the scenes. It's not obvious. Many people forget about it, but the better you do that, the better you are prepared for the future changes. And that's very sure they will come. So if you're from a sustainable perspective, better invest in architecture really early to make sure that there is some guardrails, so that you have a more homogeneous landscape that is easier to adapt to changes.
Right. And I think it's really important for people, when they're thinking about the architecture, while you're choosing what tools, what systems, what platforms, what will allow you to solve the core problem you're trying to solve best over the longest term. And I think that's a really important distinction to make as well, because I know companies where they thought they made a smart decision in base platforms and stuff, but they made a smart decision. What am I trying to say? it's you pick the most fuel efficient car, but you forget that you have 8 family members. And so it's super fuel efficient,
Yeah.
but it doesn't solve the problem. And that's maybe an analogy for what I was trying to articulate there.
Yeah.
But
And that
definitely,
might
definitely.
be just because that requirement was forgotten when they listed what they need, right? And that's one of these things that can make the difference. As I mean, like the 11th requirement, right? 11 or 10 family members. It's a difference. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Very well said. Daniel, this has been a great interview. I have a couple of pages of notes. Is there anything I haven't asked you about, I should have asked you about?
That's good. We could continue for days, right? But I think we covered the most important things in my professional life. So yeah, that was a
Good.
nice chat and good thoughts that you had around those topics. Yeah, really
Well, thank you.
appreciate it.
And if we wanted, if listeners wanted to connect and reach out, if they had follow-up questions, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
As I'm not very active on X, LinkedIn is probably the easiest thing to reach out to me.
Okay. So for those that want to connect with Daniel, go look up Daniel Lipp, L-I-P. That's Daniel Lipp. Daniel Lipp. We've got the right one if he's in Switzerland working at Syngenta Group. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. It has been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for sharing with my audience and I, knowing you have your own responsibilities, your own people to take care of, your own family, your own children. Thank you for coming and sharing with us so we can hopefully all enter into this technological future better.
Thank you so much. It was a huge pleasure and honor and a big fun. So all the best to you as well and to all your listeners. Great. Keep on doing that great work. Thanks a lot.